Hello, welcome back to Enjoy Parenting. As always, I'm Kyle Steele, the head of school at VanDamme Academy and father of two. And my lovely co-host is Lisa VanDamme, mother of four and the founder of VanDamme Academy. And our topic today comes to us from a question that was written in, fascinating question. The more I think about it, the more I want to say about it. A viewer, Luke, writes, would love to hear a discussion on the club sports phenomenon, where at a very young age, kids get involved in very intense activities. It would be helpful to discuss frameworks for evaluating how to develop kids' talents, while also letting kids be kids and not overcommitting family obligations to support them. And so this was one of those questions where I started by saying, like, I don't know if it applies to me. I didn't really do sports, but then the more I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, here's another thing I want to say about it. So, Lisa, I thought that it might be good for us to just kind of start by going over what was our extracurricular life like. And for you, since Isaac doesn't have an extracurricular life, he doesn't have a curricular life. You can talk a little bit about how extracurriculars, whether it's sports or something else, have played in with your kids' life. Then maybe we can move on to some principles.
Sounds good. With four kids, excuse me, still recovering. With four kids, I could end up taking up the whole show just talking about their experiences. So I'll try to condense it down to a few essentials. Doing the show, I feel always slightly senile because I feel like I'm repeating stories, but they could have been on Clubhouse and I might not have told them at all, but I might also be repeating myself. But I think this story is worth repeating in this context. And that is my first experience with extracurricular activities, which was with my daughter, Lana, who's now 22. And she was about three at the time. And I decided to enroll her in a ballet class. And I took her to ballet and she would yawn throughout class. The teacher would ask her to do things and she would kind of half-heartedly do them. She wouldn't really engage with the other kids. She looked kind of miserable. And new parent that I was, I thought, well, she needs to learn how to push through her discomfort and she needs to learn to follow instructions and she needs to learn a new skill that's different from the other things she's doing in the rest of her life. And so I tried everything, talking to her, explaining to her what her responsibilities were, bribing her with donuts, which she reminds me all the time, you got to do your athletics so you can have a donut afterwards. And it was sometime into that I thought, oh, I think she really just doesn't like ballet. She just has no desire to do this at all. And that same kid later decided, well, two things. She became very obsessed with horseback riding and took up dressage, which is a really demanding activity and requires a lot of athleticism, a lot of dedication, a lot of time commitment. And that she would have done for as many hours as I would make the opportunity available to her. And then she also became interested in gymnastics at about the age of 9 or 10, I think. And similarly, became obsessed with it, wanted to go all the time, could spend hours at the gym, ended up getting on the team. So that was just kind of a good instructive introduction to sports and raises that question of when ought you to kind of incentivize and encourage your child to push through the times that they don't want to do it? And when are you asking them to do something that in a very fundamental way they don't want to do?
Yeah. So it's interesting that what you say is that there was a large extent it was guided by the enthusiasm that Lana had for one activity or another. That ultimately is what steered you, but that you also were mostly keeping it in bounds with the other values in life, that you didn't let it overshadow that. Yeah. Well, I and when you talk about the dressage and just how time intensive it can be, that's a little bit like the club sports phenomenon in that it can be just a near infinite time sink if you let it be. But I do think there's something else in the club sport phenomenon, an element of like seductive elitism that I want to come back to a little bit later. I want to talk a little bit. I don't have any extracurriculars for Isaac except a gymnastics class that he does once a week. He's terrible at it. The kid can't jump on a trampoline, but it's fun and he loves it. And I get to sip some coffee while I watch him, so it's good. But I have no club sports experience in my own life. The last time I was in any sort of sports team was 1993, and it was a bowling league. So I had no sports in my upbringing of any way, shape, or form. But similar to it, though, my family became very interested in community theater. It started with just we like to go to musicals. And then my sister and I saw a youth community theater production, and we thought it looked so cool. So we wanted to audition for the next one. And then we started to get parts. And it was at the same time my parents were thinking about career changes. My mom was ready to not be a full-time homemaker. So she started to make costumes on the side as a part-time career. My dad ended up running the theater in the town, and that's been his career since then, is running theaters and museums and those sorts of spaces. And I even, my sister and I started to take drama classes and dance classes and singing classes. I even went to a boarding school for the arts to study theater for a couple of years. And I thought the whole experience was wonderful, but there's something about the club sports phenomenon that makes me wrinkle my nose. So even though on paper, I look like I was a club sports kind of, well, let's say a theater brat, which is kind of a variation on that. I have a lot of skepticism of the club sports phenomenon that I kind of want to explore. But I do want to admit that I'm speaking from ignorance. Most of what I know about club sports is just what other parents have told me. And most of the time they're complaining about how much driving they have to do to get their kids to different sports.
One thing we could do is try to kind of inventory and elaborate on what are the hazards of involving your child in club sports. The hazards in terms of orientation and motivation, why you're getting them into that in the first place, and then the hazards in terms of lifestyle balance and commitment. Is it taking up a disproportionate amount of their life? And then even health issues is another big picture health issues is another interesting topic around this.
I think that the health issues are what kind of catch headlines, like brain trauma in football, or stunted growth in gymnastics or something like that. But to some extent, I think that that's like the outlier concern myself. The big concern that I have is that you're just kind of, it's putting things upside down a little bit, that extracurriculars are extra, and that they're largely supposed to be like hobbies and amusements and fun things to do that create a sense of community, rather than like a very serious profession, almost like a demi-profession for a child. So that's one of the hazards I'm perceiving, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, well, one of the things that has to be made explicit there, which we all became very acutely aware of with the college admissions scandal, was that so much of the motivation there seems to be admission to college. And you do hear that from parents a lot when they're getting their kids involved in sports from the youngest ages, is they're viewing it as a ticket to college admission, not as they're viewing it through that lens, not as something holistically. How does this fit into my child's life? And what do I, as a parent, think its value is within that context? But it's just almost like a checkbox that has to be something that has to be checked off as part of this, resume creating for their admission to college. So if that's the motivation, that's going to cause all kinds of problems down the road.
Yeah, and I suppose that won't be that surprising to people who watch this, that if you're designing your child's childhood around something second-handed like a college admissions board, you're not going to enjoy parenting, and they're not going to enjoy childhood nearly as much as you might hope for.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it's when the sport becomes like it's serving some greater purpose like that, like, oh, that my child is going, we don't send kids to little league to so that they'll be in the MLB, and we don't send them to chess class so they can be grandmasters, and my
Mhm.
parents didn't send me to drama class so that I could be in Hollywood.
Mhm.
um that it's there's I think that you need to get in touch with what the real purpose is of these extracurriculars, and it's much more like that you it's a place where you can develop discipline, where you
Mhm.
can learn to work together as a team or a group, where you learn how to lose, where you learn how to practice and how to really focus on something. And all, but also like the role that it's supposed to play in life is primarily fun. It's a way
Mhm.
to fill some time. It's a thing to do on the weekends where you see your friends, and you get excited and you cheer,
Mhm.
or you get the butterflies before, opening night. That it's like that, and that's it. Like that's the end point of the value. It's not I'm doing that so that I can get to the major leagues, or so that I can get to a college scholarship and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
um
Yeah, it
so
seems like a lot of people enter into that scenario with this idea that my child might become an elite. This is the elitism danger, I think,
right.
that you're talking about. Like they might become an elite athlete. Well, that's so one of the themes that comes up a lot on this show is the expose and follow idea. Like expose your
Hmm.
child to opportunities and then respond to their level of the level of interest that they display in that. So, ironically, as we talk about this, I have a child who's spending a good 8 hours a week at doing gymnastics, and a significant portion of the rest of her time at home practicing here too. And that's an unusual scenario for my family, but it's entirely driven by her. She is starved for it. If she's not able to do it, she derives incredible joy from it. She, has a reasonable talent for the sport. And so for now, I'm just following and supporting something that's
Yeah.
very much driven by her desires.
Yeah, and my impression from Coco's experience is that it's not part of a long range plan to achieve something amazing. Like she might have, dreams of being on a TV show or something like that,
Mhm.
but it's most of the satisfaction she gets from it is from the class itself, from the activity itself.
Mhm.
And when I think back to my own childhood, even when my whole family was wrapped up in this community theater, and that was like it was driving our entire schedules. It was not so that we could get into a good college. We did it for the joy and pride of making a good show, and to earn some applause, and to be proud of the production. Um, and so I think that the club sports thing, it's the way that it markets itself is kind of a um we're not, anyone can come in here, this is a club, like you need to be good enough to get in here. And then they kind of have a whole hierarchy of clubs and leagues that you can get into. And I'm not saying that it's rotten, root and branch or anything, but just that that promise of like your child might be great, and if you sign them up and take them to all the practices, they could achieve greatness and something wonderful. I think
Mhm.
that a parent needs to be a little bit wary of that, it's a very easy way to be marketed to, and it's very easy to kind of get a lot of other values out of priority when that happens.
So, just to try to summarize what we've been saying so far, if so, it seems like the thing to do is to go in with the right expectations, and the expectation should be this is an extracurricular activity that's meant to be fun, that my child is going to experience, um, some of the trials and challenges of being engaged in a sport, and the camaraderie of being with a team, and all of these values that come from that. But it's supposed to be this side value that that is mostly about kind of enriching their life with something fun and satisfying. Now, if in the course of doing that, you discover that your child has this unique talent and fierce ambition within that sport, then you can follow and encourage that. But there is a hazard in going in with the hope and expectation that that's what's going to happen. And more than that, the greater hazard is with the need that happens. So if it's about, I'm going to get them into college with this, then it goes beyond an idle hope into something that I need this to happen, or my child's future is going to be compromised. So does that seem like a healthy way to look at it?
I do. I think that's good ways to organize. I think that one kind of rule of thumb you could maybe use is to say, if this is compromising other values that in a vacuum should be higher, like if they're missing school, if they're missing holidays and family gatherings, or even if you personally can't have the life and values that you want because so much of your time is being consumed by club sports, then it might be time to really soberly reflect on the level of commitment that you have. But there's one thing that's you're alluding to is this idea that my child could be great, and just how tempting that is. And often that the parents see like, and I could be the thing that stands in the way of their greatness. If I had taken them to more soccer practice, then they could have been great. And I can understand that thought and that worry, but I think it needs to be recognized as a neurotic thought, that it's not one that's really based in reality. It's kind of like your imagination conjures up something that my child won't achieve their potential because I did something wrong. And that's so painful that you want to avoid that. And that's neuroticism, to be guided in that way. And, that's just also not really how greatness works. Like, it's not like there's a formula for greatness. Take them to enough practice and then they become great. If that were the case, then greatness would be commonplace because everyone would know how to achieve greatness by just putting them in these things as much as possible. And so I know that I'm sounding very critical and very pessimistic or even cynical. I'm not trying to say it for that reason. I think that these extracurriculars can be a beautiful thing because they were a very beautiful thing in my life. They just really need to be seen through the right frame, so that they are part of like a well-balanced, robust life, and not as this kind of weird pursuit that is all consuming.
This is raising a deeper issue that I find really fascinating and really complicated. And that is that the desire, I feel like I encounter this a lot in people I know, the desire for greatness in their child, or the desire that they have a unique and distinct passion that they find all consuming. So they want their child to be, they have a vision of the person who's a supreme talent and incredible, just had, uniquely passionate and dedicated to something. And that's an explicit goal of theirs or drive of theirs, is to create a path for their child to become that sort of person. And I'm pretty sure this is true of you, but I just don't relate to that idea at all. I don't think it's how passion is fostered, is by having that as a goal. I think it's actually probably usually a detriment if you've got it as a goal. And I want my kids to be happy. And I don't think being uniquely passionate and talented at something is a requirement of happiness.
Yeah.
I think having a career that you love and having a talent for that career is important, but that's different from this vision of the exceptional human being.
Yeah, we could really start to have fun with a broader topic here, this phenomenon of greatness and this
Mhm.
pursuit of it. One, I agree that it is a real thing in our culture that some people get obsessed with, to be remarkable, to be special in that kind of way. And I also think that, sorry, there was something outside the office that
Oh,
distracted
that's
me.
okay. You want me to
Um,
pick up there? Because I've
yeah,
got
please.
a comment on what you just said. It's just hilarious that a theme in my household for the last couple of weeks has been "You're not special." It was, and we found it so useful in so many contexts. I'll tell you how it came up. My kids, my older two, watched the Inventing Anna Netflix series. I don't know if you've seen it or heard about it, but it's about this girl who was a fraud. But anyway,
Right.
the context of the show doesn't even matter. There was a moment in the show when a woman, when the reporter who was pregnant is, I think, complaining about pregnancy, or, discussing it as some special burden on her. And I think it's Anna who says to her, you're not special. You're not special because you're pregnant. That doesn't make you special. And this keeps coming up in various contexts where my girls were talking about how they felt like some people were making an excessively big deal about college graduation. And they were saying, it's not, we went to class and we did what we were supposed to, and now that process is finished. It's not some enormous achievement that we graduated. So that theme came up again of you're not special.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a danger in thinking you need to be special. You need to be happy. It's good to be happy, fulfilled. It's good to be fulfilled, and there are requirements of fulfillment, but that doesn't mean special.
Well, I think it's related to another cultural phenomenon that you and I are morbidly fascinated with, which is the kind of like WeWork phenomenon of trying to make yourself look amazing, and there's actually nothing there. And in the show We Crashed, there was the wife who wanted to be special all her life, and she founded a school with the mission was to help every child unlock their superpower. And so you can see the worldview there that we normal children that are just doing fine, forget that. That's unacceptable. The goal has to be for them to be super. And that superness is inside of them, and it's unlocked, and it's we who are keeping it from manifesting. Now, we're sitting here talking about TV shows.
Before we move along, okay, can I make one hilarious connection here? I saw something recently, like some kind of meme or something, that was saying there can't always be unusually long wait times on a phone call, because everyone you call now says we are experiencing unusually long. It's no longer unusual if it's every time you call. Well, similarly, not every child can have a superpower.
Yeah.
What are they super over if they all have a superpower? It's okay for some of us to be, ordinary.
Yeah. Well, so we've identified this cultural phenomenon of wanting greatness and superiority and specialness. But where does it come from, and what's the alternative to it? And I think that this is just a pet theory of mine, that that people do this because they don't know any other way to survive. And what I mean by that is they think that that's what it takes in our modern economy. The only people that are going to be successful are the people that are somehow exemplary, that there's fewer and fewer spots in an elite society. And the way that you do it is by being disruptive and thinking differently and doing something that no one else does. And so there is almost like a widespread skepticism of bedrock virtues that have stood humanity in good stead for millennia. The idea that I'll teach my child to be honest and hardworking and they'll have a good life. People are like, no, they won't have a good life if they're honest and hardworking. If they're going to have, in order to stay at zero, they need to be superb at something better than everybody else. And so I think that now I think that this is ultimately a disservice, because another line of criticism against we're really beating the heck out of club sports, and we're using it as a totem for a larger phenomenon. So sure. I say this with all apology to the people that are just having the best time in club sports, and it's a perfectly healthy part of your life. Like via con Dios. That sounds wonderful. But the thing that is most hi Coco. The thing that is related to this idea of sorry, one second. Boy, we're getting all kinds of interruptions on here, aren't we? The thing that is related to wanting to be special, that I think is another fault of it, is that if I train my child, let's suppose that Isaac shows a preternatural ability for chess. And just like that movie, Searching for Bobby Fischer, I dedicate infinite amounts of time and energy into making him good at chess. I have no idea if that's actually going to be what he needs in the future. And there's actually only a very narrow number of possible futures where being a chess grandmaster will be a path to happiness and wealth. But things like those bedrock virtues, like being honest and hardworking and having integrity, they are, and to give them like a solid grounding in a liberal arts education, and to have a healthy relationship to sports and discipline and fair play, that's going to hold them in good stead in a wider variety of worlds. We have this obsession with multiverses in science fiction and comic books these days. Being a chess prodigy is not going to do well in a lot of the multiverses, but a more boring, less supernatural upbringing will actually hold them in good stead in a lot more. So anyway, that's one of my.
I just have to say that I love the concept of bedrock virtues. I have a feeling, I don't think I've heard you did that phrase just pop in your head right now. I like that phrase. I think it's going to come up again often, I suspect. And of course, I'm glad you made the connection to education, because that immediately came to mind, is that education follows a lot of those trends too, or people are seduced by that as a model for education too, that what we need to do is not make everybody do the same thing, not give them this kind of standardized liberal education. What we need to do is direct things to their particular talents and interests. And I've had problems with that approach always, but this is an interesting angle on it, is that if it's about cultivating superpowers to make sure that they have a competitive advantage in the world, it's just not the right way to think about education.
Yeah. There's this idea that the only way to get ahead is to be disruptive and different, and that includes in education. And since we're doing this on the Ayn Rand Center's umbrella, I'd like to point out that disruption is not one of the virtues in OPAR, nor is novelty or anything like that. That a lot of the virtues in OPAR are what we might call those bedrock virtues. That it really, I suppose pride might be the most surprising thing on there, but there's not a lot that's on the virtues that's all that surprising, at least to me. And so, if club sports are helping your child to develop what might be considered much more mundane bourgeois values and virtues, like a sense of fair play, dedication and discipline, and also, just making sure that they have an athletic life, then I think that sounds like a very nice, well-balanced part of your life. But if it's really becoming disproportional and you feel like you're trying to, this is a weird analogy, but if you feel like you're trying to bet on, if it's like a life is a roulette wheel and you're trying to bet on 7 as much as possible, hoping to get a jackpot, I don't think that's a wise strategy in childhood. You kind of want to bet on black or red. Now the analogy falls apart because, the house always wins in gambling, and that's not true with child rearing. But
I get the idea.
Yeah.
I like it.
So I think we're rounding out the end of our time here. Is there anything else you want to say on this topic?
Thanks for being patient with the disruption by an actual child. at the
Yeah.
house. As you know, she's not feeling well today. I told her she could poke her head in if she wanted to. I asked if she wanted to brush her hair, and she said, "No, I never brush my hair when I go on your shows." So I guess because she's always sick when she shows up. But
I was glad to have her here. I got the criticism that I go on too long in the podcast, and so hearing her sigh was a good check on my rants and ravings.
perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was fun, and I guess we're going to head over to Clubhouse now to
Yeah.
talk about club sports.
This was a wonderful question. Thank you to Luke for
Yeah.
submitting it. Please put your comments and questions in the video. They give us a lot to talk about, and we really enjoy it. Thanks very much.
Bye. Say bye, Coco.
Bye.